The Burning Crusade Anniversary Edition is releasing on February 5th, and these are the first things you should be doing in Outland after you've crossed the Dark Portal, with considerations for both your main and your alts, because whether you've played TBC before or this is your first time, there are quite a few things which are different this time around compared to the normal experience. This version of TBC is coming with account-wide attunements, alt-friendly heroic keys, and a bunch of quality of life improvements that are going to make the whole experience smoother. And when you first start TBC, there is an absolute ton of content that's front loaded. For real, the first few weeks of this expansion are the most busy by some way. So it should be good to have some idea of what's going to be available to you and to have a think about how you're going to be tackling all the content. So with that said, let's make a start. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a platform that aims to equip you with the skills to get on board with a career in back-end development through interactive lessons and learning. It stands out by taking you on this journey in a more interactive way, as though it was an RPG with experience, leaderboards, achievements, and so on. Boot.dev offers self-motivated individuals the tools to get fully on board with the Python and Go programming languages, and it does this through hands-on learning, where you're going to be writing tons of your own code so that you can get a grasp of the fundamentals from the basics onto more advanced lessons. And Boot wants to set you up with these fundamentals and encourages you to really take your time and understand each point rather than just trying to rush you through the course as soon as possible, so you'll be as well equipped as you can be for your future job search. Speaking of which, careers in this field are often remote, have very solid earnings, and you can start this today at your own pace. If you want to find out more or check them out, click the link in the description box and use my code WILLE to get 25% off your first month, or even your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Many thanks to Boot.dev for the sponsor today. Let's get on back to WoW. The first thing you should do when TBC is launched is log into your alts if you have any that you want to level. You have to actually log into an alt for an experience bar to appear and for rested experience to start accruing on your alts. It's simple enough and only takes a moment, but it's something absolutely worth doing. Of course, following launch, there's a pretty good chance that you've got some world buffs chronobooned up and ready to use. And if I were you, I'd be thinking about where best to use those buffs for their duration, because after those 2 hours or so are gone, you're pretty much not going to be getting any more world buffs because the amount of people running 60 content is just going to diminish super fast. Of course, that means you have the ever-present decision of TBC of, do I go do quests in the open world, or should I go grind some dungeons for at least a while? The thing is, TBC leveling is significantly more linear than vanilla. In fact, it is the most linear expansion leveling experience that Blizzard ever did, and in future expansions they very deliberately separated players up to different sides of the world, so not to create another huge bottleneck. But let me tell you, if it's not already immediately apparent to you, Hellfire Peninsula is going to be pretty unplayable at launch. Even if there's 30 or 40 layers, which there could easily be, by the way, we had those kind of numbers on the original release. You're going to be fighting over every single hellbore and competing with other players to pick up every single scrap of metal off of the floor. If you've ever played fresh TBC before, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. And dungeon spamming is what a lot of people see as a less fun, but it is a very viable alternative to putting yourself through this. Especially if you can land yourself with a consistent group, it is very worth doing for at least that initial launch period. You'll be starting off in Hellfire Ramparts before going over to Blood Furnace to do the quest there, and then heading over to the Coilfang Reservoir to spend a lot of quality time in the slave pens. After that, I'll be over to Outland to push towards 70. There is another big positive with dungeon grinding too. You're very much killing two birds with one stone. You're gaining experience while simultaneously working towards the reputations you'll need for heroic dungeon keys, and because you're gaining the reputation in heroic dungeons, you're not using up quests in the open world which would have given that reputation. So for the launch day and probably a few days after and the first few weekends after, I would have a think about when you're logging in and how likely the open world is to be sort of unplayable, because even if you're not a huge fan of dungeon grinding, it may be worth just doing it for a little bit whilst things cool off out there. Another thing I've always always enjoyed doing relatively soon after I get to Outland is making the trip over to Shatrath City in Terakar Forest, collecting all the various flight paths on the way, and effectively setting up your operational base in the capital. You're going to be going across Hellfire Peninsula, Zangarmarsh and Terakar Forest anyway, but it's worth the run. Once you're there, you can grab the flight path immediately, and Shatrath is centrally located in Outland and will serve as your main hub throughout the expansion. More importantly, Shatrath has portals back to major cities in Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, and you will need to be going back to the old world now and again, especially for things such as training your new class abilities. For example, if you're on a hunter and you want to learn steady shot, for example, that becomes available at level 62, you're going to want to do that as soon as you can. Now, if you could find a mage to portal you back and then Hearthstone back to Hellfire Peninsula, that's obviously going to be faster overall. But I swear personally, I never make as good of a use of a Hearthstone as I should when I'm questing out in the open world, and sometimes you do forget to swap its location as well. If you just set it in Shatrath, then it's always there so you can get back to the old world, and you can fly out to any zone in the expansion really fast as well. And if you haven't already, when you're training your new abilities, make sure you've unlocked dual specialization. It's only going to cost you 50 gold, and you can set up a second spec for dungeon grinding compared to one for the open world. The other major decision you'll face in Shatrath is choosing between the Aldor and the Scryers. This is a faction choice that will impact your shoulder enchants, profession patterns, and some gear options early into the expansion. This choice is available straight from level 60, by the way, after you've completed the City of Light quest, but there is no rush to do it super early at the same time. In fact, you can't even turn in the uncommon reputation items such as fell armaments or arcane tomes until level 64 anyway. With these two factions, generally Aldor tends to be better for melee DPS classes and tanks, and Scryers leans more towards healers and casters. That being said, the difference is overall quite small, and there are exceptions to this, so this is something you should be checking. As mentioned earlier, achievements are being made much more streamlined in TBC Anniversary, and during these early weeks, getting attuned will be one of the main pursuits for your main. If you're part of a guild, I'd definitely look for a group of players who are on the same step of the attunement as you, and just work your way through it with them. There are a bunch of different dungeons involved, and sometimes it can be difficult hopping between different groups and finding people who are doing exactly what you want to do, though maybe with our mega servers this will be a bit less of a concern than it usually is. You should also know you'll be able to start the Nightbane attunement quest too if you want to prepare that for week 1 when Karazhan opens. However, you will need to go inside Karazhan to complete the quest and do things in a pretty specific order in order to be able to kill that boss week 1, but at least you can make a start on it. Another important thing is that the raids will open 2 weeks after the launch of the expansion on February 19th, so you have an entire 2 weeks to level up, to gear up through heroics, to do attunements and everything else you need to get set up on your main character, so I would say that's a pretty decent amount of time, considering we usually have a week or so to do this. I think Blizzard have extended the amount of time we have because of attunements primarily. PvP Arena Season 1 will open 2 days before that on February 17th. There will be a bunch of PvP gear available at Honored from a number of different factions in the game, so you should go around and buy those, and there is also a set of PvP gear from Honor, the currency available too, which you should also go and pick up. Also confirmed is the content difficulty levels for this first phase of TBC Anniversary. All tier 4 raids, so Karazhan, Gruul's Lair and Magtheridon's Lair are going to be post-nerf, meaning they're going to be quite a bit easier than what you're used to if you played this expansion much before. That being said, it's easy to always underestimate content and get sent back to the graveyard. The heroic dungeons, however, will be on their pre-nerf configuration, meaning that they're absolutely gonna have hands and be relatively difficult, especially if you are going in under-geared. Certain heroic dungeons such as Shadow Labs, Shattered Halls, and the dreaded Blood Furnace are gonna be the biggest challenges in this tier, I believe. So absolutely don't underestimate the 5-player content in TBC. In tier 5 and beyond, Blizzard have said they're still open to considering whether it should be pre or post nerf, so we'll have to see what they do long term. Professions are another area where a bit of preparation can set you up for the rest of the expansion. Most of the major crafting professions in TBC have specialization options that become available at specific skill and character levels. For example, tailoring specializations can be unlocked to level 60 with 350 skill. skill, and you can choose between Mooncloth, Shadow Weave, or Spellfire specializations. The big benefit is when you craft your specialization cloth, you'll get multiple instead of one. However, you can still craft the other two, you're not locked into only crafting the thing you spec into. Alchemy specializations require level 68 and 3 to 5 skill, and you can specialize in transmutation, potions, or elixirs. Again, when you're spec'd into one of these, each craft gives you a chance to make extra items. Transmutation tends to be the one to go to early on because primal might is needed for so many crafting recipes. For leatherworking, engineering, and blacksmithing, specializations can actually already be completed during vanilla content. However, some TBC items also require these specializations to have been completed. For example, if you want to craft and make Lionheart Blade, you're going to need Master Swordsmith, so just be aware of that. And if you get all that done during the first 2 weeks and want more things to think about, well, there are these secondary professions too which get updated in TBC. There is no feast type food buff in TBC, everyone has to bring their own items still. Leveling cooking is always relatively inexpensive early in the expansion because so many people are leveling and just posting their stuff on the auction house, so this is an easy time to level up cooking. And the various recipes, depending on what class or spec you're playing, can often be obtained from reputations across the world. There are the fishing and cooking dailies too, which need you to either go and catch some fish or make a specific item out in the world of Outland. Both of them don't take too long and award items that you can use for cooking, or occasionally some uncommon or rare rewards. Again, the key dates are launch on February 5th, PvP Season 1 on February 17th, and raids open on February 19th. And those are what I'll be thinking about doing after I've crossed over the Dark Portal. Thanks again to boot.dev for supporting the channel. Their courses are free to view, so if you're interested, why not check them out via the links down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.